Good evening, everyone. Please, we are encouraging you to fill the poll. It's going to be anonymous, so we just want to have to know how we what to know about it, so that we can all gauge ourselves at the end of this webinar. That is just the essence of the poll. So please be encouraged. It's completely anonymous, so that we can all measure how far we've gone at the end of this webinar.
Let's try as much as possible to attempt the test question. It's just very important that when you do that, so that after the class, after our panelists have discussed the topic with us, you'll be able to see probably if you're deficient in some aspect of what you know before. So that's the essence of the pre-test assessment. It's very important. Let's just attempt it and let's see what you know. And because we are going to do a post-test of this too, after the lecture, the topic, after our panelists have taken us through the topics, so we're going to do a post. Then we'll be able to ascertain what we know before and the new thing we find out. Thank you.
So we have about 14 participants, and so far only 14 responses. Please, let's continue doing this. Like I said, it's completely anonymous. It's just for us to gauge ourselves and know how far we've gone. So that once this webinar is over, you can say, oh, I've learned this, and then you can always go back to the questions and say, oh, okay, I got this wrong. So let's just continue. Okay, so we'll be closing this poll by 7:20. And okay, so we'll be addressing the issue. Some people complained about not seeing it, so we are going to address that now. So we'll be closing the poll by 7:23. So let's just try as much as possible to continue filling it. Let's try to resolve the poll issue right now.
Oh God.
So we apologize. We are trying to relaunch the questions now. So it's becoming, we can resolve that and we'll give also that we can start. All right, the test has been relaunched. So we are giving us 2 minutes to do this. We are going to be starting by 7:26. So let's try as much as
We are sorry for the inconveniences, our apology. So we're going to start right away. We are sorry for all the inconveniences. So we'll be starting our this point. I do like to hand over to the first speaker in the person of Dr. Fernanda Marrocos.
Okay, hello everyone. I would like to thank you NDDI for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today to present the NOVA classification system and the concept of ultra-processed foods. And I think the first step that we'd like to make with you today is to invite you to kind of let us know the keywords that comes into your mind when you think about ultra-processed foods. And for this, you can scan this QR code on the right side of our screen, or use the link. So we would like to invite you to do this very quick. It's just 3 words, and then we can show the word cloud. So please feel free to do this activity very quick.
Okay, so while this activity is going on, please remember to drop on the chat box where you are joining from. Please just drop on the chat box your name, the state you are joining from, the country. Please go ahead and do that and scan the QR code right now, and so that you can fill the form. It's just a very brief form. So the link is also on the chat box. You can see the link on the chat box, so you can click on it. If you can't find the QR, if you can't scan the QR code, probably because you're using your phone, just check on the chat box. You see the link, and you can sign up immediately and fill it. Look at the QR code. We have a lot of people joining from several places. I can see someone from Ghana. I can see people from different parts of Nigeria, from the east, from the west, Ekiti State, Abuja. Welcome, blessing. Thank you all for joining. Please click on the link so that you can fill that immediately. We have people all over the country joining. This is wonderful. So please just click on the link and fill the form so that we can start soon. For 21 responses so far out of 57, we are doing well. So just continue. 44. Okay, the numbers are increasing. I'm so happy about that. So let's just do that as soon as possible. Thank you for engaging. Thank you for being part of this workshop. Thank you for being part of this webinar. We are grateful to have you all here. And we promise that this is going to be a wonderful webinar and you are not going to leave here the same. We promise that you are going to live here as better nutritionists, as better researchers. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. We are having a lot of responses. That is really nice. All right, Dr. Caroline, I think we can start. We have a good number of responses right now.
Yeah, that's great. So, of course, we are going to talk about these aspects of ultra-processed foods during my presentation, but it was very nice to see that you have already we are familiar with this, some aspects of ultra-processed foods already. So, Carol, next, please. So first of all, the NOVA classification system, it's a kind of a paradigm shift in nutrition science, because for a long time, dietary guidelines have been based on nutrients, and actually this remains true even today. And a good example of this is the food pyramid, where foods are grouped according to similar nutrient profiles, and it often places very different items such as oils and sweets or rice and breakfast cereals in the same group, independently of the level of their industrial processing. But more recently, studies have been demonstrating that this nutritional profile of diets is not enough to explain the relationship between food consumption and the risk of obesity and other NCDs. So next, Carol. Yeah, exactly. Next. There are other characteristics of food consumption that we need to consider apart from the nutritional status. And one of them is, for example, the complexity of the food itself. So we have the food matrix, for instance, where we can find interactions between nutrients and non-nutrient compounds, such as bioactive compounds that could protect or harm health. So food is very complex and a non-random combination of these compounds, and these can influence the impacts on health. The evidence also suggests that the combination of foods isn't random, and the traditional eating patterns result from evolutionary and cultural experiences. thus the health effects of dietary patterns wouldn't be attributed to individual foods, but rather to the way the foods are combined, prepared, and consumed. And another important factor is the circumstances surrounding the act of eating. So the location, stress exposure to stress situations, and also the social interactions. And all of these aspects will be determinants of the quantity and the quality of the foods we consumed. And finally, foods are produced within food systems whose characteristics also affect public health through their impact on society and the environment. So we can have food systems that can be socially and environmentally sustainable, that can promote justice and the protection of life and the environment, which is mostly in the case of organic and agroecological production, for instance. But we can also have other types of food systems that can have like produce and cause inequality, unnecessary impacts on natural resources and biodiversity. Next, Carol. So here we have a typical example that demonstrates why an approach focused specifically on nutrients is limited. In the case of Diet Coke, if we look at the label on the right, we'll see that this food product appears to be very healthy, as you can see from this lovely green label, demonstrating the absence of total fats, saturated fats, sugars, and salt, plus it's caffeine free. However, if we look at the list of ingredients on the left, we identify at least 3 ingredients that can potentially lead to negative health effects. So caramel 4, which is on the top of, yes, thank you, Kara, is considered dangerous to human health since it produces a potentially carcinogenic residue. And also we have aspartame, which is classified as possibly carcinogenic to humans, and also phosphoric acid, which can cause harm to our heart, kidneys, and bones when consumed in excessive amounts. So based on this idea, Professor Carlos and colleagues initiated a research journey in 2009 based on the hypothesis that food processing would be the key to explaining the relationship between food consumption and health. And we have this commentary who was wrote in 2009. And it is assumed that what is done to food before its consumption can determine the nutritional profile, the food metrics, the combinations, the eating habits of these foods, and also their environmental impact. And to test this, the group proposed a new classification of foods that categorizes foods according to the extent and the purpose of industrial processing. And we also have these other papers who can provide more information on the novel classification system. Next, Carol. So this decision to classify foods according to the extent and purpose of food industrial processing was based on the fact that the division of foods into just unprocessed or processed categories wouldn't be very helpful or useful, because the vast majority of the foods we eat are processed in some way. So we had to create other categories to kind of identify which types of processing could be harmless, beneficial, or even essential in terms of human evolution. So for a correct evaluation of these effects of food processing on health, it was necessary to kind of divide in 4 main groups. So the first one is called unprocessed and minimally processed foods, which is basically edible parts of plants or animals after being removed from nature or having undergone minimal preservation process. And in here we'll have fruits, vegetables, and other minimally processed foods such as rice, beans, etc. And in group 2, we have processed culinary ingredients, which are substances extracted from foods or nature and that are used to prepare, cook, and season group 1 foods. And in this category, we would have, for example, vegetable oils, sugar, salt, among other examples. And then we have group 3, who are classified as processed foods. And within this group, we have group 1 foods, so unprocessed and minimally processed foods, which are modified with the addition of culinary ingredients in order to preserve foods or to make them more tasteful. So in this category, we would have, for example, processed cheese, processed bread, which is based on ancient process. And if we group and combine these foods to kind of prepare and in you know, to cook these foods all together. Next, Carol. We would have the culinary preparations. So if we combine all these 3 groups, we would say that the industrial processing here, the level of this processing would be beneficial. Next, Carol, please. Thank you. And finally, the 4th group is actually what we are most interested in here today, ultra-processed foods. And these foods, they are basically formulations of several ingredients that include original or chemically modified food substances obtained with the fractioning of whole foods and additives, which are used to make the final product palatable or hyper-palatable. So the food matrix here changes significantly. And all these foods, they are created basically to replace all the other 3 groups that I mentioned before. So for each type of real food, we would kind of identify an ultra-processed food option. So here we have some examples. So in the case of fresh juice, we'd have like powdered juice. We would have other sweetened beverages. In the case of processed breads, which is also an ancient food, we would have packaged foods with loads of additives and so forth. And although there is a very specific and detailed definition of ultra-processed foods, there is also a very straightforward definition that says, if a product is packaged and has at least one ingredient that you wouldn't recognize or find in your kitchen, then that product is probably ultra-processed. And this can be visualized here. So we included some examples of ultra-processed foods at the top and of the list of ingredients of processed foods at the bottom. So we can see that ultra-processed foods, they have a lot of food substances or additives that we wouldn't recognize in our or use in our kitchen. Next, Carol. And in this sense, we have some papers that specifically describes what would be the ultra-processed food markers. So how we could identify ultra-processed foods when we analyze the list of ingredients. So the first component that could be considered a UPF marker are food substances that, as I said, we would never or rarely use in our kitchens, and they are mostly provenient from commodity crops. So in these examples, we would have refined oil, modified starches, and protein isolates, which are combined. So, and they generally come from soya, from maize, wheat, and other crops. And here we have some examples. So protein isolates, gluten, casein, whey protein, high fructose, corn syrup. These are some examples of these food substances. And these substances are added to cosmetic additives to emulsify, stabilize, preserve, gives flavor, color, or enhance the taste of these products. And here we also have some examples of the names that appears in the list of ingredients. So a more detailed description of these markers, UPF markers, can be found in these two documents. And an important aspect to also consider when applying, next Carol, sorry, when applying the NOVA classification system is the purpose of industrial processing. So UPFs are massively produced by a very small number of transnational corporations, also called the Big Food and Big Soda, that currently control the global food systems and have the power to influence the food that is produced and consumed. So here we present this picture from produced by Oxfam. And another important characteristic of UPF is that, next Carol, because they are very caloric dense, nutrient poor, and hyper palatable, and they also go through processing techniques that destroy the food matrix. They damage the indigenous process that signal satiety and control appetite, leading to excessive and unconscious calorie consumption. Next. Furthermore, research from national food consumption surveys conducted in 10 countries had shown that ultra-processed food diets, which means diets that are richer in ultra-processed foods, contains more energy density, free sugar, total fat, saturated fat, trans fat, fibers, vitamins, and minerals. Next, Carol. And if you will look at this image, which is a figure added in a paper wrote by Philip Baker, we can see here it is showing data on food sales from Euromonitor. And we can see that sales of ultra-processed foods are increasing in all regions from 2006 and projected to 2024, including the African country. But also it's important to mention that although most of what is eaten in high-income countries, such as in the UK, where 60% of what they eat comes from ultra-processed foods, we also see that this increase in ultra-processed food consumptions has been occurring more rapidly in emerging markets, such as lower and middle-income countries. And this is also happening, next, Carol, for ultra-processed food drinks, which we can see here for the Africa region. Carbonated soft drinks have increased from 16 liters per capita in 2006 to 41 in 2024. So this is very concerning when we think about the impacts on health, human health, but also on planetary health, given their environmental impacts as well. And how How easily we can identify ultra-processed foods? Well, I gave some ideas and also some references that could help you, but it is interesting to compare some examples that we can find in the supermarket. So ultra-processed foods, we can find some options that mimic unprocessed or minimally processed foods. So here we can see ingredients from a fresh coconut water versus an ultra-processed food option, where they include fructose, which is an additive. It's a food substance, actually. And then we also have this option from which we can compare ingredients from processed options or minimally processed options, which is a natural yogurt, versus an ultra-processed food options. We can see that the ingredient list increase the number of ingredients. Next, Carol. And then we also have ultra-processed food options that can mimic culinary preparations. So on the left, we have ingredients from a culinary preparation of a fresh and homemade risotto. And on the right, we have an ultra-processed version. And in both, there are the ingredients highlighted that would be UPF markers. Next. And we also have some options that mimic processed foods. So on the left, we have an option for processed cheese, and on the right, an ultra-processed food option. So now the idea is for us to present a video that can comment on some of these aspects as well. And in the second part of the presentation today, Francine, my colleague, is gonna present some data on the impacts of ultra-processed foods on health. So thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thank you so much, Dr. Fernanda. Thank you so much. We are very grateful for that wonderful presentation.
Yes, so thank you so much, Dr. Fernanda. The video will soon be played right now. So please, everyone, kindly note your questions. I know we have a lot of questions, so just note them. Once it's time for the Q&A, we'll take all of them at the same time. So, in case you don't want to forget and you don't have anything to write it down, you can still drop it on the chat box now. I will take notes of it, and once it's time,
even if they want to
I
cut
will read
down.
it out. So you can drop your questions, but also note them down somewhere. Once it's time for Q&A, we can take them. So let's just watch this video while we prepare to go back to the next session. Thank you so much.
Even
Okay,
if
so
they know
in
it's
case
killing them, they find.
In case you can't watch the video now, or in case, okay, so the link to the video is also on the chat box. So you can actually copy the link and save it so that after now you can have access to it to watch it over and over again.
They can't stop.
My name's Chris Van Tulliken. I'm an NHS doctor, I'm a scientist, and I'm part of a growing group of doctors and academics who are increasingly worried about the effect that the global food system is having on all of us. When it comes to obesity, the way that we've understood the problem is it's a failure of willpower. People are just making bad choices, they're somewhat lazy, it's basically their fault. This is American government data for men and women of all different ages, the different lines of different ages for obesity. What you see is between 1960 and 1975, there's a fairly steady percentage of obesity in the population. But in the mid-1970s, obesity starts going up in all of the groups simultaneously. Now, if you're saying willpower is responsible, what you're proposing is that all of these groups of people simultaneously lost moral responsibility, and that's not plausible. Something else happened to our food in the mid-1970s to make it irresistible to people.
My name's John Ruff, and I've spent 40 years in the food industry across 7 different countries. Companies spend a lot of time optimizing all aspects of their product, the flavor, the taste, the texture. People want their product to be as good, if not better, than the competitor, so it will sell more. We use trained sensory panels to give us ratings. Is it squishy? Is it hard? Is it soft? Is it crunchy? So that's very much how the food industry operates.
One thing many people don't realise is that factory processing changes the textural properties of food. An interesting fact about soft food is you're not chewing it as much. That actually short-circuits the normal satiety mechanisms that you would have if you were actually chewing food properly. So you're bypassing a normal mechanism that tells you you're full. Once you've worked out that playing around with the texture of a food, making it softer, tricks that normal satiety or fullness mechanism, clearly there's an opportunity there for some kind of scurrilous behaviour in making food softer so that people will eat more and therefore you sell more of your product.
So much of the packaged food that we eat is incredibly soft. My kids love these. You don't typically think of this as being a soft food because it's a bit crunchy, but actually after that initial crunch, you can just crush it with your tongue, right? It's got no resistance at all. But in terms of the calories per gram, it's got way more calories than even a very fatty burger. So the softness and the energy density mean that you consume it incredibly quickly. And there's a food industry term for these very light, puffy foods that melt in the mouth. It's called vanishing caloric density. Gone. The thing that makes us eat a lot isn't just what we do to the food. It's also about logos, marketing, branding, the box the food comes in.
Eating is a multi-sensory experience. There's the look of the food, there's the smell of the food, there's the feeling of the food on your fingers. Even the sound of food matters. When you open a fizzy soda, you've got two noises. You've got the click and the tear. Sound engineers and manufacturers work really hard to get that sound just right, and that's sonic branding. Many companies have asked me to work on sonic branding for them, and I think I can mention when I was working with Kellogg, they said, "Ooh, what's sonic branding?" And I said, "You invented this." Most people will remember as children the experience of lifting a bowl to their ear. And what are they listening for? Snap, crackle, and pop. That's sonic branding at its best, and that's the original.
There's a lot of competition out there, and food companies make their money by the amount of products we consume from them. So there's a stomach share that they're fighting for, and there are hours in the day in between breakfast, lunch, and dinner. What happens between those hours? They want us to snack. You wake up and this is what you have. Snack number one, breakfast shake, ultra processed. This is heavily marketed for you to have on the go. Do not sit down, do not take time to crunch through something. Snack number two of the day. It's empty calories, energy dense, nutrient poor. Midday, you're starting to get a little bit peckish, and what do you have? Veggie straws. This is a good example of a health claim snacking product. Whereas before we would have had food, actual food, now we are marketed into believing that this is actually a healthy replacement. Some snacking products have now been made to be linked with being physically active. So after the gym, I have a high protein, low sugar bar instead of having a healthier option. You finish having dinner and you have these snacks that are sold to you as more to share, where in fact you can just finish them watching the TV by yourself. I do like them. I cannot stop eating them. And I literally can't. Oh, God.
I think one of the biggest problems with this kind of food is that so many of us struggle to stop eating it.
Hi, everyone. I'm so thrilled to be here today to speak with you on my research that looks at parallels between addictive substances and ultra-processed food.
When we look at the sorts of foods that trigger those key diagnostic indicators of addiction, it's really clear what it's not. It's not minimally processed foods like fruits or vegetables or beans or lean meats like chicken breast. It's really processed foods. It's chocolate, it's ice cream, it's pizza. It's foods that don't exist in nature. The potency and the reward power of these ultra-processed foods can trigger an addictive response that leads them to consume these in such a compulsive way that even if they want to cut down, even if they know it's killing them, they find they can't stop.
Imagine you're trying to cut down on ultra-processed food or avoid it altogether. For a start, it might be the only food you can afford, and that is true for millions of people. But it's everywhere. And it's engineered and then marketed by some of the smartest people on Earth to be irresistible. So if someone is watching this and they are struggling with their weight, with diet-related disease, I just want to reach out and grab them and go, this is not your fault. It is not you. It is the food.
The Food and Drink Federation declined our request for an interview but provided this statement. Food and drink manufacturers take the issue of obesity and poor diets very seriously, and we know we have a key role to play in helping people to eat balanced diets. Our members continue to invest hundreds of millions of pounds in creating healthier products for shoppers. As a result, UK shopping baskets now contain significantly less salt, sugar and calories than they did a decade ago. Companies are also working to raise the fibre, fruit and vegetable content of their products. It's of course up to government if they want to introduce new taxes or warning labels. However, taxes will push up the cost of food and could disincentivise ongoing investment in healthier products. We think there are more effective ways to encourage positive dietary change. On labelling, we believe the UK's traffic light system is a more positive way of nudging consumers towards healthier choices than warning labels, where global evidence suggests the longer-term impact is limited. However, we would support a labelling review, including to test whether consistent positive labelling on all healthier products would help consumers. The government's Scientific Advisory Committee on Nutrition had said there's insufficient scientific evidence on the concept of ultra-processed foods for it to be used for dietary guidance or policy making, and that further research is needed. If research comes to light that processing is a cause for concern, the food industry will act quickly to change their ingredients or processes.
Wow, that has been an eye-opening video. Thank you so much, Dr. Fernanda, for that. That video has, in fact, it has been mind-blowing. I'm sure most of us would want access to it. So just check on the group chat. On the chat, you would see the link, save it so that you can watch that video again for your consumption because it has so much information that we need to digest. All right, thank you so much, Dr. Fernanda, for this enlightening presentation. We are really grateful for that. So right now, we'll be going over to our next presenter, who is Dr. Francine Santos. Dr. Francine has a master's degree in human nutrition and a PhD in epidemiology. Dr. Francine will be talking to us about the public health impact of ultra-processed food. So we have talked about this ultra-processed food. We have been introduced to it. Now we need to know the impact of this ultra-processed food on the public health. So please, let's continue to listen. Welcome, Dr. Francine.
Hi, everyone. I also would like to thank for the invitation. In the second session of our webinar, I will present the impact of ultra-processed foods on public health. The video we just watched presents some characteristics of these products. Some of these characteristics Fernanda presented before, and some pathways by ultra-processed foods are linked with adverse health outcomes that we will discuss in the second part of the webinar. The video also focuses on the UK setting. The images are from UK setting, that is a country where ultra-processed foods represents more than 50% of the total daily energy on the population. In Brazil, and I think in the majority of the African countries, we maintained our traditional food habits, and ultra-processed foods represents less about 20 to 30% of the total energy intake in the population diet, but this percentage is increased during the years. Next, Carol. So first, to represent what is the body of evidence concerning ultra-processed foods. This figure represents the 2009 from 2024, the number of the papers in the PubMed with the term ultra-processed. According to this figure, we can conclude that the NOVA classification is relevant in the nutritional epidemiology, and I think it is one reason that we are here discussing this important classification, especially for early researchers that are our major audience here. Next, Carol. Since NOVA food system classification were published on 2009, there are increasing the body of evidence as concern ultra-processed and healthy outcomes. And this slide shows several papers, systematic reviews, and meta-analysis that evaluated the role of ultra-processed and healthy outcomes. But in these studies are there is one study, and we needed to combine this evidence. Then, next, Carol. In the last year were published this paper that combined this evidence. It is an umbrella review of epidemiological meta-analysis that described the relationship between the screen is not okay. Thanks. In this umbrella review, the authors found that there is many studies in the adverse health outcomes associated with ultra-processed food consumption, and especially cardiometabolic, common mental disorders, and mortality outcomes that are associated with the consumption of these products, and they used data for a large population. And this study is important because they combined this meta-analysis, and we can observe that ultra-processed foods can impact public health. And it's important to mention that any study reported on association between ultra-processed food intake and a beneficial healthy outcome. All studies found the association with a positive direction. But a limitation of the umbrella review that I mentioned before is that included several kinds of epidemiological studies, such as cross-sectional studies, cohort studies, and in this figure I present the results of other meta-analysis for prospective cohort studies. Then we can to see that there is an association between ultra-processed foods with mortality, cardiovascular diseases, depression, and overweight and obesity. Next. So, when we can conclude that there is a relationship between ultra-processed food consumptions and adverse health outcomes. But what are the mechanisms of ultra-processed foods are linked with these outcomes? So I think the first mechanism that the literature would like to study were through the profile of nutrients in the diet. This meta-analysis in several countries observed that the ultra-processed foods are associated with deterioration of overall dietary profile. We can observe that there is the consumption of ultra-processed foods is positive with total fat and negative with fiber, for instance. Next, Karen. But this randomized controlled trial would like to test this hypothesis. So in this randomized trial, the authors matched the participants in the ultra-processed versus unprocessed diets for 14 days. For 14 days in a crossover study. The diets were matched for presents the same calories, sugar, fat, fiber, and micronutrients. And the authors found that ultra-processed diet caused increase in the energy intake and weight gain. And it's important to emphasize that both diets had the same quantity of calories, sugar, fat, fiber, and micronutrients. So one conclusion is that the pathways that ultra-processed foods are linked with adverse health outcomes is not only by the nutrient profile. Probably there are several other characteristics present in these products that could explain these results. Next, Karen. It's just an example of the meals that were of offers to the study participants in this randomized controlled trial. The left pictures is the breakfast of the ultra-processed diet, and in the right is the breakfast in the unprocessed diet. So I mentioned that probably there are several other mechanisms of ultra-processed food action, and I mentioned some of these mechanisms that we have evidences in the literature. Fernanda cited some characteristics of these products. They are convenient, practical, and hyper palatable, and the video shown it for us. They had aggressive marketing and also replacement in nature or unprocessed or minimally processed foods by ultra-processed foods in the meals. For instance, in my lunch, when I eat a pizza or a hamburger with a sweet beverage, I am replacement traditional food and probably minimally processed foods or the other NOVA groups. Also, there is evidence in the literature that observed that diets with high percentage of ultra-processed foods are associated with urinary, phthalate, and bisphenol concentrations. These substances are food contaminants because they are present in the package of the foods. Also, components that are new formed during their processing, gut microbiome alterations, metabolic alterations, including society control systems alterations. There is increasing the evidence concern the food addiction of these products as shown in the video. One of the specialists that in the video, Dr. Ashley, studied food addiction of ultra-processed foods. And it's only a figure to summarize the link between ultra-processed foods and adverse health outcomes. This publication is from 2020 or 21. And then since this paper were published, we had more evidence, but the authors summarize in direct effects, such as the nutritional profile of these products and also the metabolic effects, the replacement of unprocessed or minimally processed foods. And I only show this picture because I think it summarizes how complex and probably there is a synergy of all these mechanisms, and is not one mechanism that explain how ultra-processed are linked with disease. And concern public health, when we observed that there is a robust body evidence, in Brazil, there is the National Dietary Guidelines since 2014, include the considering the food processing in the Brazilian Dietary Guidelines. Next, Karen. It is the publication in the slide, the other slide is the Brazilian guidelines for adults, and here is the Brazilian dietary guidelines for infants and toddlers. How I know that we, in our audience, there are researchers from Uganda, and in the research for this webinar, I found this paper that described the consumption of ultra-processed foods in 410 children aged 6 to 36 months. And the results show that the children consumed at least one ultra-processed food or beverage in the previous day. Most of these children, 57%. And also more than 60% of these children consumed these products more than 4 days in a week, and it is a high percentage. And other countries, especially in the Latin America, are using the novel food system in their guidelines, such as Uruguay, Ecuador, and Peru. Israel launched the national dietary guidelines following the novel food system classification. I include this publication to such as an instance for the presence of the NOVA classification in the international guidelines, such as WHO, that include recommendations based on the processed foods. In this publication about sustainable healthy diets. And the policy and again, dietary guidelines, we have the policy and programs. Of course, there is several policy and programs, and I think you can to think about how is this situation in your countries. In Brazil, we have this program, the Brazilian School Feeding Program, that offers meals for students from public schools in our country. Then the regulations limited the quantity of ultra-processed foods that could be to offer in this program. According to recommendations of our dietary guidelines, and the right figure is an example of a French program. And to finish my presentation, I think we are going to able to the opportunity to discuss more of the public implications of ultra-processed foods in your settings. There is a practical activity in the second day, but I present some recent reference that discuss the presence of ultra-processed foods in Africa setting. The first paper were published is a commentary that was published in the Nature, and the authors discussed how ultra-processed foods are changing the food system in the Africa countries, and the relevance to immediate action with policymakers and society to find the increasing of ultra-processed in the diet of the population. And the other publication is a series that focus on ultra-processed foods in African countries, and it's only a reference that you can to use after our webinar, and to understand more of the presence of ultra-processed in the African continent. It is the results of our word cloud that we did in this webinar. We can to observe that the major word is unhealthy, that we mentioned in our presentation: high processed, hyperpalatable, and there are some characteristics relationship with the hyperpalatable of these products, industrialized. And I think it's we would like to give for you the results of our word cloud, and open for Q&A.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fernanda and Dr. Francine. This has been an enlightening webinar, and I'm sure we are all learning so much from this. So please, it's time for our Q&A questions. It's time for our Q&A session. So please drop your questions on the chat box. One thing that I enjoyed so much about this is that as nutritionists, as dietitians, a lot of questions keep coming up on, oh, should I eat this? Should I eat that? And most of the time, when you just look at the basic ingredients, for instance, maybe corn chips, right? It's just corn. But now you talked about all the multiple ingredients there that shows that, oh, this is actually ultra-processed. So thank you so much for that, because right now there's a growing interest in eating healthy in Nigeria and in Africa generally, because, you know, the burden of diabetes and other nutrition-related diseases are really growing. The thing is growing a lot. So people are really taking interest in this. So this webinar is going to give us so much information. It has really facilitated us so that while we get to the clinic, and also while doing our research and, you know, interacting with people, we can give better information on this. So thank you so much for that. So please drop your questions in the chat box right now. So we have some of them, and I'll be so the question is open to any of the presenters to take. So I'll be reading the first question. So it says, what is the negative impact of ultra-processed foods on the children? So I think I would leave that. So when you're done with that, then I'll go to the next one. Or should I take all of them?
Yeah, I actually included a response in the chat box. But I believe that the mechanisms are very similar for adult populations. So I think Francine can respond to this question as well and add further information. But I included here some findings from a systematic review demonstrating that higher participation of UPF in children's diet has been associated with many maternal-child outcomes, such as increase of weight gain, adiposity measures, overweight, early weaning, lower diet quality, metabolic alterations, diseases, and consumption of plastic originated from packaging. So from these, we can notice that there are some similarities, of course, with studies conducted with adult populations. But Francine, I don't know if you want to add any other examples as well.
Yes, I also to complete your answer. I think Carol study ultra-processed foods between children, especially studies from Pelotas cohort studies, and she observed that the ultra-processed food consumption had an impact in the children development. and also increase the risk of weight gain during the infancy and adolescence. I don't know if Carol would like to complete.
Yes, thank you, Francine. Yeah, actually, just to mention that my work in Pelotas birth cohort was the evaluation of the consumption of ultra-processed foods and weight gain, BMI gain, and also fat mass gain. And yes, we found an association, but I think this is just one of the many, many studies that we have now. At the time that I did this study, we had no studies at all in children. So it was important to start the research on this field. But yes, as Fernanda mentioned, this systematic review is important to bring us all the evidence that we have now for children. So I really recommend you take a look at this paper to see all the maternal and child outcomes that are now seen as harmful for children, and you can see that, just to mention, because these systematic reviews usually evaluates if the studies are of high quality. So this is important because we have this evidence, in this paper, only one of the studies included did not present high methodological quality. So this is important to mention because we have this strong evidence of the effects of ultra-processed foods in children's health.
Thank you so much for that response. So we'll go over to the next question. It says, with the growing population, ultra-processed food seems to be inevitable in this our time. So what is your view on that? And then I would also ask the second question, which says, because of this growing population, what can actually be done to minimize the intake of this ultra-processed food?
Yeah, so I can start commenting on that. Well, I think while UPFs, they seem inevitable, there are already a lot of movements trying to transform food systems as a whole in order to promote sustainable and minimally processed food systems, even for large populations. So we need to take into account that there are some reports demonstrating that the global hidden costs of agri-food systems, for instance, in 2020, was around 12 trillion dollars per person, and this value is almost 10 times the global GDP. So although increasing in consumption of UPFs, particularly in lower income settings, is kind of inevitable, even like the big players from the finance sector, they are visualizing that if we keep on this track, we'll probably continue losing a lot of money and also having a lot of impacts in terms of environmental impacts. So actually, there is a lot of discussions, even in the G20. Actually, this year, the G20 meeting, which is the meeting, it's a global multilateralism forum, is happening in South Africa. And we try to influence this discussion in the G20 in Brazil, trying to increase awareness around the importance of reshaping food systems to move not forward UPFs, but to the opposite side. And so this is just like some big pictures about what we've been discussing in terms of food systems. And I also saw a comment and a question from Gloria, who is actually asking how can people resist unhealthy foods? I don't think people should try to resist them. I think the food environment should promote better options for people, right? And this is what we need to claim for policymakers, and as dietitians, we need to try to move this agenda forward on how people can have better access to healthy foods, instead of, trying to convince individuals that they should avoid and resist unhealthy foods. So because when we talk about ultra processed foods, we try to also use data at the population level. We are always thinking of what kind of policies we can implement to reshape food systems, food environments, so they can promote healthy dietary patterns and avoid environmental impacts at the same time. So we have some examples, and I think Francine presented as well. We can introduce dietary guidelines who can take into account the level of industrial processing. We have like policies to increase our awareness for consumers, such as the food labeling, the warning labelings, etc. So I will open to Francine and Carol to also comment on this.
Yeah, I agree with Fernanda in the answer, because the ultra processed food consumption is not only the people knowledge of diet, but is the consequence of a food system. And in this food system, we can think several factors, including food environmental. The video shown how the setting around us can to implicate in our food choices. And I think it's not choices, but it's the consequence of this food system. And is necessary actions with policymakers, and such as the programs, the policies, the guidelines, and in several factors of the food systems.
Yeah, that's perfect. I couldn't say better.
And just to add another point, so we discuss a lot within our group that because we are very privileged in lower income settings, because we don't have the same picture as high income settings, where their diets already moved towards ultra processed foods. So in the UK, like 60% of the eat is already ultra processed foods. And for instance, in Brazil, we have like caloric contribution of UPFs around 20 to 30%. Actually, I think 20. And so we still eat a lot of real food. So in lower income settings, we need to do our best in terms of public policies to preserve traditional diets. And we think we are in a better position, for example, when we compare with high-income countries as well.
I would like to go to the next question. I think is Dixon. The first question is, if you had to create a healthier version of a favorite ultra-processed snack, what ingredients would you use? I think it is relationship with the Fernanda presentation. The ultra-processed foods is not only the ingredients, but there is a deterioration of the food matrix. And I think probably the replacement of ingredients or the reformulation of these products will not to change ultra processed foods in a minimally processed or in other Nova group, because the characteristics of these products can to the change of ingredients will not to change ultra processed foods, because it's not only it.
Okay, all right. So thank you for taking that question. And I'm glad you keep mentioning this for the environment, because actually at the end of the day, we're working on something around this. So please just stay tuned to this, and we are really going to get so much information from that. So, okay, so Dixon also asked, what do you think is the biggest challenge in avoiding it in our diet? So do you still want to address that?
Yeah, I think we already mentioned that the biggest challenge nowadays in avoiding ultra-processed foods is actually the food environment. So we are not, for at least in Brazil, for instance, when we go to get the tube or to the bus station, we are all exposed to ultra-processed foods. So it's very challenging to avoid them, of course. So in the Brazilian dietary guidelines, the golden rule is always choose minimally and fresh foods instead of ultra-processed foods. So in that case, it stimulates individuals to have your fruits with you whenever you go to work or to other places. So you avoid buying things in these food environments, because we are all exposed to a lot of packaged and unhealthy options. But of course, people also have other barriers to have access to fresh and minimally processed food. So we need policies that encourage their availability in the food environments. So, for example, we need to have policies to reduce costs and food prices. We also need to take into account now climate change, which adds an additional challenge to, access to healthier options. So all these things are happening all together, and we need, as dietitians, to claim for policymakers, and whenever we have an opportunity to claim for better policies to protect consumers. So that would be my main comment.
And just to add also, Fernanda, I think this is also linked to the second question of the same person, Dixon, related to the strategies that could help people reduce their intake of ultra-processed foods in their diets. And actually, it's not related to the choices as mentioned by you and by Francine, and it's more related to the policies and the strategies that the governments can do to help people to reduce their intake. It's not a personal choice, actually. And I was reminding also that a policy in Brazil has been the limitation of the ultra-processed foods in schools. So in the food served in the schools. So this is another important strategy that could help people, actually could help children to have better habits during their infance, and then developing a better preferences to the adult life.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So we're going to be taking the last set of questions right now. Okay, so it says been linked to eating disorder. So
I can start, yeah. I can start commenting about this. Actually, there are a lot of evidence now related to mental health, ultra-processed foods and mental health. We have now several studies on this, but specifically on eating disorders, we have some studies that have showed a relationship between the higher ultra-processed foods intake and bulimic binge eating and other eating disorders. So we have now, we don't have yet for example, systematic reviews summarizing these associations, but we have, some studies linking this the UPF intake with this health outcome.
Okay, all right.
And
Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you so much, Dr. Fernanda. Okay, all right, please go ahead.
Francine, please go ahead.
Yes. And also I mentioned in the presentation is not the eating disorders outcome, but the food addiction. The ultra-processed had these characteristics of food addiction. Also, there is some studies in this topic, but we can to think that ultra-processed foods are potential for eating disorders.
All right, so that is our final question for the night. Because of time, we'll have to be ending this session soon. So thank you so much, Dr. Fernanda. Thank you, Dr. Carol. Thank you so much, Dr. Francine. This has been an enlightening session. I'm sure when we get to the clinic by next week, and also while interacting with people, and then this has also opened up us to more research, especially here in Africa, where we have low data on these things, although we have a lot of ultra-processed food, but the effects are not there's not much research on the effects of this on people's health. So thank you so much. This has really been eye-opening. I'm sure most of us who are about to go into our PhDs and our master's research, now you have project topics to work with. So I'm sure the lecturers will be very receptive to this, because this is going to be quite innovative. So thank you so much for the time. Thank you for your effort. This has really been wonderful. So guys, please join us on our social media and get ready. Tomorrow, we are going to be having a hands-on practical on how to calculate this and how to identify these foods. So our webinar tomorrow is still by 7 p.m. and we are still going to have these amazing people again to take us on that practical aspect. So get ready, and it's going to be an amazing session. Thank you so much once again for having us. So please join us on our social media. Follow us on our social media at NDDI on all platforms, and this video would also be available on YouTube, so you can go there and watch it, because this is really an amazing learning process. So thank you so much, and do have a wonderful night rest, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.